30 seconds and counting. 25 seconds and counting. We are still go. 20 seconds. Guidance alert. The guidance system now going internal. 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. Ignition sequence start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good evening, viewers here in Europe and in Africa. Good afternoon to my viewers in the Western Hemisphere, and good early morning to my viewers in the Pacific Rim, and welcome to the Angry Astronaut, a special live stream where we are going to be wrapping up my IAC coverage, but we're also going to be talking about a pretty controversial topic that came up during the IAC convention. But before we plunge into that, I'd like to see where everybody is checking in from, please. Those of you who are watching, we have, I'm actually kind of surprised with the number of people that are checking in already. Hello, Valdosta. Thanks a lot, Robert, as always. Really do appreciate that. Yeah, that's, by the way, Valdosta is where my nephew went to university. Hello, Cambridge and Four Marks, UK, Northern Ireland, Brum, UK. Hello, München. Hello, Edinburgh and Tampa Bay and Brooklyn. And hello to our producer up in Yorkshire, ASN. We also have Enfield and Lincolnshire. And hello, Blackfoot, Idaho. Thanks very much for checking in today. Been a long time since I've been to Idaho, that's for sure. So yeah, I suspect that we're probably going to have a fair number of European viewers today, given the topic. And as I said, this is some controversial stuff that we had going on. Hello, Texas, and really, again, hello, Cologne or Köln. Thanks very much for checking in as well. By the way, I am going to be in Austria here around the holidays. I'm going to take my son skiing. I don't ski myself, but he likes snowboarding. So I'm going to be in the Austria-Germany area, and I may get a meetup squeezed in there somewhere for those for my German viewers. I'll be in the south of Germany though during that time. But if anybody wants to check in there, that would be fantastic. So let's go ahead and plunge right into this. IAC was an amazing experience on a lot of levels, but there are a number of things that I found and discovered while I was there, and it was mostly in the field of Europe's space industry, and it is a grim situation. It really has been from the start, but it's getting worse at this point because we've actually had some fledgling launch providers who have ventured into the fray. They've tried to get rockets either off the ground or started the process with static fires, and we've had some failures. Now, of course, Virgin Orbit was an American company, but it still had these British connections to the Virgin Corporation. And of course, Spaceport Cornwall was extremely dependent on Virgin Orbit's success. And then, of course, it failed. After 4 straight successful orbital flights, Virgin Orbit failed with that flight, and they were in a tough financial state at that time anyway. And so the funding evaporated, not just for Virgin Orbit, and they went bankrupt, but also and were destroyed, chopped into bits and gobbled up by Rocket Lab and Stratolaunch. But but then the spaceport itself also, it's not closed, it's not gone, and it has the potential of being reborn. But now all it is, it's a part of the airport in that region, the Newquay Airport. It's no longer its own independent spaceport. Then again, though, it never was really an independent spaceport because it was part of the Cornwall Council, regional council there. So they never really had a whole lot of independence as a spaceport anyway, just because they were so dependent on that funding from the council. But the spaceport is still there, and they have a lot of tenants there. And I think that they are going to get some customers and become operational again here soon. But still, they took a big hit, and also not a lot of willingness to invest in them after that failure. We had the same thing happen at Saxavord. Once again, I'm not saying that Saxavord is in deep trouble and about to go out of business or anything like that. Quite the opposite. But Rocket Factory Augsburg also experienced their own problems. Of course, that's what's on my thumbnail. And it right before this whole thing got started, right before I went to IAC, the following was posted on their Twitter, and it's a grim and honest and really unexpected in terms of its wording. This happened right after the tower capture, by the way, of the Super Heavy booster. Congratulations to SpaceX. What an incredible feat of engineering. Mars, here we come. At the same time, the coin has a second side. It shows and confirms that Europe has completely lost touch. Can it catch up? No chance, at least not the way things are going at the moment. Europe has ambitious private space players with innovative ideas, courage, and a vision. By the way, I agree with that. Europe has many spaceflight companies with a lot of innovation. Unfortunately, they are being held by the long arm of the law and are in danger of withering away while old structures, processes, and mindsets are maintained. What we need immediately and systematically are state anchor customers, substantial investment, and a framework that allows and promotes unbureaucratic, fast, and risk-taking development. Otherwise, Europe will quickly sink into insignificance when it comes to the exploration of space, its resources, and its potential. And we leave it to the rest of the world to make history, just like SpaceX did yesterday. And it's up to Europe, and it's up to us. And I have to tell you, that was a bit of a shocking thing that came from RFA, simply because they're one of the preeminent launch providers in Europe. I mean, they have a reputation to uphold. And here they came with this really aggressive statement about the state of spaceflight investment in Europe. And basically what they're saying is that it sucks, that there's no one really willing to invest in European spaceflight over in Europe. And so I took that opportunity to go to a number of people, all mostly Europeans, at IAC to see what they thought. And by the way, John, thank you so much for the tenor. I really appreciate that. Not going to get much from the new useless UK government. And then Robert, thank you so much for the $10. Really appreciate your support. That's actually Robert's 20th super chat on a live stream, man. So yeah, that was from RFA. And the impression that I got, well, you know what? Before I give you my impression, I'm going to give the producer an opportunity to queue up a couple of clips that I sent him. And I'm going to ask him to send the first of these clips right now, if he can get it queued up.
Hey guys, we got an opportunity to get a quick on-the-spot interview. Really appreciate your time. Quickly introduce yourself to the viewers.
Hi everybody, my name's Adam Watts. I work for Nemo UK. And we're a propulsion specialist for satellites. So we do rocket engines, we do complete propulsion systems, and we sell primarily into the USA.
So real quick, first of all, you had an opportunity to listen to me in regards to the statement that RFA made lately. Do you have a reaction to that?
Yes, so I read the Rocket Factory Augsburg commentary, and obviously their primary interest is on launch. And I do agree that it's difficult for Europe to keep up with Elon and SpaceX because they're doing such a fabulous job. But there is no doubt that Europe still needs its own launch capability. We have Ariane 6 coming along, and certainly the French have a fantastic defence capability up in space. It's essential that Europe keeps going with its own defence capabilities, and I see primarily that the launch capability that we have in Europe will be used for that. But if you look at the other aspects of what Europe is doing in space, for example, our own company here, Namo UK, we are supplying 90% of our engines and our products into the US market. So the US market is the one that moves fast, and it is probably the most important one with regards to development. But I think RFA have a view that is primarily based on launch vehicles and launch vehicles that are trying to enter the market.
So you're saying when it comes to your types of products, these RCS thrusters that we're looking at right here,
Yep.
it's a little bit of a different environment here in Europe. It promotes your kind of business a bit better. Is that what you're saying?
So we get a lot of support from Europe. Europe is very intent upon keeping its capability as a space developer and a space components provider. And of course, we have European Space Agency, which many companies, many countries put money into. So we all benefit from that, and it enables us to develop products. But we have worldwide markets that we sell into, not just European. European type of missions are usually functioned by ESA at the start, and therefore they take a number of years to come to fruition. It's different in the States. In the States, you get a startup company, they can bid for a project, win the project and get going. So it's a faster market in the US, it's slower in Europe, but both are equally important to our company.
Ready when you are. Okay. So that should be the end. I was watching that a few seconds behind you guys, which is why we had that brief delay there. Sorry about that. But in any event, yeah. So that's one response that we got. And there's another that I'm going to play for you here in just a second, or rather our awesome producer is going to play for you. From Skyrora, who actually is a launch provider in this area. Chris, thank you so much for the tenor. Really do appreciate that. You can see, by the way, we have that little target up in the top left. This is an ongoing thing. If we can get to that target, that super chat target, 5 random viewers will get access to Discord and Patreon benefits for a month. We'll just throw that out. So it's just if this is a new thing YouTube is doing. So in any event, if we can get to that 10, that's just an ongoing thing. I'll throw out 5 free memberships in return for that. Okay, so that's one opinion that we got. And again, as I shared this information across the board, a lot of the response that I got is that it sounds like RFA didn't get the funding that they're hoping to, that they lost their funding opportunities as a result of their booster that exploded during the third static fire test that they carried out. So we're going to go ahead and now play the second clip. This is from Skyrora.
Yeah, I think trying to get investment for launchers is a very difficult game to play, full stop. But I think what we're seeing is in America you have the chance to fail and fail fast. And you can see that with the likes of Astra when they've been doing their projects. They've been allowed to develop, fail, develop, fail, fail. I think the UK and Europe are a lot more reserved, so they expect to see some successes almost immediately, and that's why it's a little bit of a more reserved market. So it is a very difficult market to get the investors in there. There are some out there, There's some out there that'll let you sort of push that limit, which is great. Obviously, we were founded by one of them for that purpose, who's allowed us to do a lot with R&D and not expect full results. But I think their statement was a little bit correct. It was a little bit out there, but a little bit correct in regards to there does need to be a lot more funding into it to try and catch up with the US. I don't think you'll ever see a European launcher in the near future sort of landing like SpaceX does. That takes a lot of development and a lot of sort of experience and a lot of money. However, I think we also have a different set of capabilities over here. We have a different mindset towards engineering as well, and I hope that can sort of counteract that a little bit. As I said, we've been quite frugal with how we've spent our funding and still got quite far ahead. I know the other teams at RFA, ISAR and such have done the same. So money is a big differentiator, but I think if we use it wisely enough, it'll take us a while to catch up. But yeah, I do think we can get there, but we do need some more investors that are maybe open to a bit more risk.
Okay, I lied. I had one more question in relation to what you just said, and something I've been wondering about a lot when we're talking about European launch providers. How in the world are you guys accomplishing what you do and the development that you're making, not just you, people like RFA and others, with so little money? I mean, we're talking tens of millions of euros here, not billions of euros. How do you do it?
I think it comes down to the mentality of things. I can speak for the Scottish and obviously for ourselves. We have the mentality of having the UK way of doing things to try and find better and cheaper ways of doing it, making it easier, making it quicker. Lord knows if there's a process that takes 5 hours, let's figure a way to do it within 2 and get to the pub. I'm not going to lie on that one, but there's so many things. So taking a look at what did help out with Rocket Lab and SpaceX at the beginning with the modular approach, the containers, you see that now with most of us. So there's little things like that, and it's just saying, well, I think one of the biggest ones is you look at buying components in. If you buy space grade components, they could be 10, 15,000 a box for, say, nuts and bolts. But then when you look at the actual health and safety rating on them, they go through less requirements than the automotive, which is £500 a box. So it's looking at things like this, bringing in suppliers who actually do what it does and needs to do, but making them aware, actually, you're a space company now as well. You don't just do things for cars. And I think that's what you're seeing. And this is why, instead of being billions and billions, we've managed to keep it down to the millions that we have done so far.
So that is once again Derek Harris from Skyrora, and he's been with that organization for a very long time. He and I have known each other for years, and I figured that I would get a pretty honest opinion from him in regards to what he thought about all that. And Skyrora definitely is another company that has struggled with funding and also struggled with failure, because they too experienced actually a fairly embarrassing failure that happened when they tried to launch their Skylark L out of Iceland, and there was a coding error that led to the rocket being fired, the fuel being engaged, but not the oxidizer, meaning all they had was just a little bit of nitrous oxide left in the rocket when it ignited, meaning that it took maybe a couple hundred meters off the launch pad and fell right into the ocean. Again, that's 3 different organizations in Europe that have experienced these sorts of things. RFA with an explosion because of the static fire, Virgin Orbit, of course, failing to reach orbit and going bankrupt as a result. And then finally, Skyrora with Skylark L. By the way, the good news, though, it looks like Skylark L is going to have another launch attempt either in first or second quarter of next year. The Skylark L, not the XL, not their big rocket. Their suborbital rocket will be launching from Skyrora here, or rather from Saxavord very soon. So they are definitely staying active. So, but what I got across the board from most people in Europe, at least the ones that have this connection to the spaceflight industry, is that in Europe, an investor looks at a failure in a different way than we do in America. And it's a really significant difference, and a difference that's going to kill European space flight, to be frank, if indeed this is true. And honestly, I think it is, because I got this across the board from lots of people at IAC who are associated with European spaceflight. With European investors, it's okay to fail as long as it kind of looks like you almost made it. In other words, if RFA had actually managed to get their rocket off the pad and it just didn't reach orbit, or maybe it exploded a couple of kilometers up or something like that, that's not that big of a deal. But the fact that it exploded during a static fire test, oh, that's unacceptable. That's, can't have that. And again, that is a ridiculously uninformed and unrealistic perspective when we're talking about space flight. They are essentially expecting companies like RFA, again, if this is true, and I think it is, they're expecting companies like RFA to operate the way ULA does. In other words, test every single component to failure, it taking years and years and billions of dollars in order to do that. That's the only way that ULA actually does things the way they do it, to where Vulcan Centaur will reach orbit on its first attempt, as it did. But again, that takes forever, and it takes a massive financial investment. You're not going to get that same performance out of a launch provider that's using off-the-shelf components from the automotive industry with tens of millions of euros worth of investment. It's just not going to happen. By the way, Alan, thank you so much for the tenor. Really do appreciate that. The only way to fail is not to try. And you are absolutely right about that. And the impression that I am getting, and this is something that absolutely needs to change. And in my opinion, the only way that it's going to change is if direction comes from European governments. European governments need to demonstrate commitment to the European spaceflight industry, regardless of what might happen, even if we have these sorts of failures, if you want to call it a failure, along the way. But it isn't a failure. The kind of the explosion that RFA sustained during their static fire up in Saxavord is the sort of thing that you learn a lot from. Gives them a much better chance of actually reaching orbit when that rocket leaves the pad. That's the sort of perspective that we need to get. And in my opinion, only European governments are going to be able to enforce this kind of mindset. If they jump in and continue to provide aggressive funding to companies that experience these kinds of setbacks. In other words, if RFA has this issue and a booster blows up on the pad, give them more money, because they got to the point to where they had 3 consecutive static fires and only the third one failed on a 9-engine static fire. That's progress. That's huge progress. That's actually more progress than any company has made on an orbital class rocket in Europe thus far. No one else has gotten anywhere close to that yet. I think that there will be companies like PLD Space and others that are going to be at that point soon, but no other company has actually performed multiple static fires on an orbital class booster in Europe except for RFA. That means they need more investment, and that investment should come from the public sector first in order to encourage private investment, because I don't think you're going to be able to get European investors to change their mind otherwise. I don't think they're going to be able to understand how things work and why private spaceflight has been a success in the United States. I don't think they're going to be able to do that completely on their own. I think it's going to require an investment from the European public sector, from the government side, in order to provide incentives and encouragements in order to get these private investors to jump in as well. Match the funds, for example. Okay, you invest, $100 million in RFA, or you invest $100 million in Skyroar, we'll match that, or 100 million euros, 100 million pounds, whatever you want to call it. Without that, all of these promising companies are going to fail, because none of these companies have the massive financial backing that SpaceX does, and Blue Origin for that matter. None of them have anything like that, or even Rocket Lab. Peter Beck and his billions of dollars, he has far more money to invest in Rocket Lab than, in my opinion, probably all of these private launch providers in Europe combined. I don't think that all of these investors put together can add up to what Peter Beck is willing to invest in Rocket Lab. He's a guy who is absolutely determined to see Rocket Lab succeed, regardless of what its setbacks might be, and was willing to invest billions of dollars to make it happen. Europe doesn't seem to have any of these kinds of investors, and that is very sad indeed. I think the potential is there, because there's definitely people in Europe who have that kind of money. There are plenty of billionaires in Europe, be assured of that. But there just doesn't seem to be any billionaires in Europe who are willing to take a chance on European spaceflight. And I'll tell you, that is going to spell a really grim future for Europe. That's just going to lag behind everybody. As a matter of fact, Europe is already lagging behind everybody. India, way ahead of Europe, okay? Way ahead of Europe. And that is completely unacceptable. Europe's combined, the EU, even minus Britain, the combined economic strength of the EU is way bigger than India, in spite of India's massive population. All of the European nations combined. Hell, if you just took Germany and Britain's economy and put them together, that's much bigger than India. So there's no excuse for India to have this amazing premier space organization that's routinely putting probes on the moon now, that's going to put human beings into orbit, that's going to put their own space station into orbit before the end of the decade. How is it that a company like India can do that, and yet Europe cannot? And again, it's not just them, obviously. You have China way ahead. You also have even Russia accomplishing so much more than Europe actually does, even though Britain's economy is substantially bigger than Russia's. And again, a lot of this is also mentality. It's not just a mentality on the part of the investors. It's not just a mentality on the part of the governments. It's also a mentality on the part of the people. When I went out and I interviewed the man on the street, the average man on the street in London, so many people, especially the kids, especially the young people, none of them believed that Britain could do it. When I said that, hey, France's space agency, CNES, has 5 times the money, 5 times the investment in space than Britain does. Do you think that Britain's space industry should have the same? Do you think that they should match France? No. I got a no over and over and over again. Oh, we can't. The economy's struggling. We have high unemployment. We have this. We have that. There's no perception, no understanding on the part of so many members of the British public that what France can do, Britain can also do. I have to admit, I was shocked and disappointed, because Britain's economy is every bit as big as France's economy, every bit as big. And so the potential for investment in space flight is every bit as big. And yet France is the only country that's launching rockets into orbit. heavy rockets into orbit with Arianespace. Of course, Germany also contributes along with the rest of the European Space Agency, but still, and that, by the way, is another problem. And that's something that RFA mentioned too. Old institutions, the significant investment, the billions of euros that do get invested in space flight in Europe, they are all going to Arianespace. By the way, there's always been a long-standing debate and people who have been throwing in the comments saying it's not Arianespace, it's Arianespace. Quit trying to sound like you're French, blah, blah, blah. I decided to finally clear up that question, and I went to the Arianespace pavilion and asked them flat out, how is it actually pronounced? And they said, it's pronounced Arianespace. You can say Arianespace if you want to, because, more people will accept that. But really, no, it's Arianespace. So just to be clear, that's how it's actually supposed to be pronounced. But all that having been said, all of the heavy investment in Europe is going to that one company and to their expendable, outdated rockets. Now, granted, fortunately, Arianespace is aggressively moving into the world of reusability. They're finally doing that pretty much because ESA said that if you don't, you're going to lose your funding here really soon. But I'll tell you, that's not enough. And it's going to be next decade, probably the beginning of next decade at the earliest, before Arianespace actually has practical reusability built into the Ariane 6 and the Suzy, their reusable human-rated spacecraft for Ariane 6. All of those look very exciting, but it's going to take forever for them to mature, and they have no incentive to make them mature as long as they know that they're going to keep getting those big investments here in Europe. Instead, what we need is competition. We need competition to drive Arianespace and organizations like it to mature more swiftly. So in other words, we need a couple of billion euros heading towards companies like PLD Space, for example, and all of their exciting human-rated space flight and pretty much what looks like their copies of Falcon Heavy and Falcon 9 that they're planning to build. All of that is super exciting stuff that they're working on. RFA with all of their innovations, such as the Argo, for example, Argo resupply ship for future European space stations, a reusable resupply ship that, in my opinion, they have plans to make it human rated. They've included some not so subtle hints that they're going to go that route. Super exciting things that deserve equal investment. Absolutely deserve equal investment. Now, fortunately, the European Space Agency seems to be getting the hint a little bit. They seem to at least be talking about aggressively funding these other companies. Even Arianespace themselves are starting to send money. We're just talking about PLD Space. They've actually received millions of euros of investment from Arianespace, interestingly enough. So it is starting to move in that direction. There is a reason to be a little optimistic. But overall, based on where we are right now and based on what I saw at IAC, it doesn't look like that enough is happening yet, that the changes are occurring quickly enough, and especially the investment and the commitment from European governments isn't there enough to make all of this happen. And there's so many reasons to make this happen. There's so many benefits that a vibrant and competitive European space flight industry could bring to this continent. Just could make all the difference in the world economically. And again, governments don't get it, the investors don't get it, and even the common people don't get it. And it's time for that to change. And hopefully that's something that will transpire soon. Really quick, just to wrap up, also wanted to make sure I also mentioned another company that was rumored to be on their last legs. They were definitely running into some problems. Axiom Space definitely having financial issues. They made a really, really aggressive push at IAC to demonstrate that they're not going anywhere. They, of course, did that demo of their spacesuit. I had an opportunity to talk to a lot of their people. They're really making, and their name, their logo is everywhere around the entire convention. They made a big effort to demonstrate that they may have encountered some problems, but they've cut back on their staffing, cut back on their expenses, and they are still very much in the game as far as space stations are concerned. And of course, they're the only private company that NASA has currently contracted to build our new spacesuits for Artemis, because Collins Aerospace pulled out of that. So without Axiom, we're not going to get new. We're not going to get. We're not going to get. Without Axiom, we're not going to get new spacesuits for Artemis. Oh, and one other thing, just to make sure, again, this is about European stuff. You may have heard recently that Reaction Engines has gone bankrupt, is in the process of just going to administration, basically meaning that only the people who are necessary to close the company down are remaining. That's a huge tragedy, because they are the ones who are working on the Skylon hypersonic orbital space plane. They've been working on that for quite some time, and it appears that they are on their way out. But the good news about all of this is that there's another company called Space Engine Systems out of Canada. And I saw all of their designs. I've been following them for a while, actually. They just bought a hangar at Spaceport Cornwall for one of their planes. And they are doing exactly the same thing that Skylon was doing. I mean, seriously, it's almost like a complete copy of the Skylon design. So it appears that these hypersonic SSTO kind of dream is not yet dead. Just another company seems to have taken up the torch. So in any event, and of course, if you haven't seen the interviews that I did throughout the IAC convention, I strongly urge you to go back and check those out. I got an opportunity to interview a lot of people who are really have their fingers on the pulse of the spaceflight industry throughout the world. Really, really exciting stuff. Yeah, Skylon, the joke of over 40 years of developing nothing. That's true. In some ways, maybe the Space Engine Systems group, they might be the better company anyway, because they've actually already built some things. They already have a hypersonic test article that they've built in Canada, and it's being moved out to Spaceport Cornwall for its first tests. So if you haven't seen those interviews, I encourage you to check them out, because I really learned a lot about the space industry. Every time I go to these conventions, I get a much clearer picture of everything that's going on throughout the world. And let me tell you something, exciting stuff indeed. And then perhaps the last follow-up that's going to happen in regards to this convention, I have a piece of content coming out tomorrow about the Indian Space Agency and everything they've accomplished, and how the hell have they managed to do it with so little funding? How have they succeeded where NASA has failed recently? So we're going to get a lot more information on that. I had an opportunity to speak to those folks at IAC too. Very enlightening indeed. So make sure to pay attention. Make sure to tune in as often as you can. I release almost daily content, as most of you probably know. Thanks very much for watching today. Again, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Please consider supporting this channel. We are so close, actually, because we got 5 super chats the last time. I was thinking about adding the 2 together. So if we can just get one more super chat before I close here, I'll go ahead and throw out those 5 memberships, those 5 random memberships. If we can't, that's fine. We'll get there next time. But in any event, thanks so much for watching, everybody. And until next time, stay angry
about space.